Hello everyone, my name is Bea and I welcome you to Curiosity, Creativity and Beyond. Today we're going to take a look at a very interesting type of tree that you can find near wetlands or streams or lakes, and is the red alder. And the thing that makes it the most interesting to me is that it seems to have two types of cones in its branches. Not only it has two types of cones, it has a different type of tiny cone here, it has another type of different ending here. So what's the story here? We're gonna find out. For this today we have, as always, a non-photo blue pencil, a 2B graphite pencil, HB graphite pencil, and 4B graphite pencil. We have our eraser, we have our sharpener, our transparent ruler that allows us to measure things and still see through. And for today's study, the bug box is going to be very useful, because as I brought this little branch home, it started losing seeds. So I've been collecting them and putting them here. So we're going to take a look at them later. So are you ready? So the first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna put the branch up there so I can use it as a reference. And as I am drawing this branch of a red alder, I am gonna tell you a few things about it. So let me put this like this, so I can use my non-photo blue pencil, and I'm just going to draw the main branch. And if you notice, it ends here, it changes angle here, and then it goes up to here, and then it changes angle here, and then here, and then boop and boop. So let's see, I'm going to start with this section here. And you can make it to scale. You can draw exactly the same size, or you can make it a little bit larger if you wish. But I'm going to make sure that I mark these points, because they seem to be very important. This one here, this one here. Try to make it line a little bit. Also do this. There we go. This branch here. Then how this branch ends here and it breaks into some sort of a V, letter V shape. Let's make sure we add that. And then we'll take care of these as well. The first thing I notice is, as I said, it has two different types of cones, and they come in clusters of 1, 2, 3, 4 in this case. 1, 2, 3, also 4 in this case. So the important thing to know is that in nature, this branch would be like this, because we are putting it on top of the paper. All these structures are going to be flat. But in the photos I put for your reference of how I found these in nature, you will see how these cones, they are drooping. So even though I have my reference here, I observe how they are in nature, and I am going to draw them as I saw them in nature. And that's why it's so important to observe things in nature, because they look a little bit maybe different from the way they look when I put them against a piece of paper. So let's see, if I look at this closer, one comes directly from the main branch, then there's another branch. So what I'm taking a look now is how this branches out. Not all these pine cones come from the same. There's another branch here that breaks into two. And then the other branch in the back that breaks, that gives these. There we go. So, and because I'm using my non-photo blue pencil, I can make all sorts of corrections before I jump with my blue pencil. So I have a main branch that gives this cone here. Then I have another branch that breaks into two, 1 and 2. The first branch gives my first cone, and the second branch breaks in two. So I have 1 and 2. And then, as I look again at my specimen, at my branch, one thing I'm going to definitely include in my drawing are the buds. Those are flower buds. And if you notice, there's a change in how wide this branch is right before it gives that beautiful bud. There's another bud over here. There's like a tiny curve on this branch. It's very, very barely noticeable. But let's see if I can include that. There we go. And this branch, as you notice, also thickens a little bit there. So it has that shape, and from there we have a bud, and when I look close at the bud, the tip is a little bit square-ish. It's a little bit thinner at the bottom, so I'm just now blocking all these bits and pieces. Now as I look at this other cluster, also in nature, we will find this following gravity, falling down. So that's something I need to make sure I reflect on my sketch. If you notice, that part here of the branch also thickens, so I wonder whether a bud is going to come out of there. I'm going to include that on my sketch. And then, as I said, this other branch right here. Oh, do you see that? That's a seed. We'll talk about that in a second. Those are the ones I've been collecting. Those are the ones I've been collecting since I brought it home. I kept finding tiny presents on my desk. Also notice it thickens right there. And overall the branch is thicker when it's closer to the tree than at the end. There we go. And then another, so we have 1, 2, and 3 kind of maybe potential futurable buds. And one thing I've been very careful when I brought this home was that this branch almost looked like it was gonna break. And when I look closer, I'm gonna put it back in the paper. Ah, another one. You see that? There we go. We're gonna take a look at those later. They're so interesting. So yeah, let's make sure that I add that branch that curves a little bit. And if I look closely, this cluster of cones goes as this. We have first the branch, and I'm just going to draw an oval shaped circle. Then the branch continues, and I have another pine cone, and this pine cone is coming towards me. That's my second pine cone. Then the branch continues underneath, and I have another pine cone, and finally the branch ends in my fourth oval shape pine cone. In my fourth pine cone, in my fourth cone. I should not call these pine cones because this is not a pine. This is an alder. So this is my branch. I left this little piece here. Let's make sure I add that. That actually is a very important part. And I'm going to explain to you why. So alder trees, red alder trees, as I said, if you walk to a park that has a pond, you will find these kind of trees, this type of trees. There we go. So this is so interesting. When I was preparing for these, I was reading about these red alder, and I kept wondering, why is it called red alder? And the reason is because if it suffers any scratch to the surface of the actual bark, the trunk of the tree, the color underneath is reddish. It's this very intense red. That's why it's called red alder. As you see, I'm following my non-photo blue and adding a little bit of detail. So I keep looking at my branch and my drawing, the branch and the drawing, because some of the details I did not add with my non-photo blue. Those I was kind of waiting to use these. And more things, more interesting things. This tree is fascinating. More things that I was reading about this tree is that the wood is used as fuel for smoking salmon, for smoking fish. I also read that the wood, it's incredible for carving. So imagine all the beautiful First Nations carvings that are made out of red alder. Oops. So I'm pretty much refining all the things that I had done. I also noticed that there are tiny speckles, look, white, along the tree branch, and I want to include that. So one thing, remember, I was wondering, like, are these new buds in the spring? I'll take a walk and see. When I look at these close up, I see they're tiny cone-shaped structures there. So I want to reflect that. Then I can come here. The color, it's so interesting. This is a different color. This is green and this is red, brownish. So I might need to take my color pencils. The color here is green. This color, it's much greener than this. This is more wood, brown. So those are very interesting things that I can totally add when I am adding some color. Let's see. So as we said before, let's see if I got this right. We have our first branch is here, and then these branches out to give this two. Let's see if I got this right. We have one there, then this branches out, and this branches here, and then there we go. Now, if this happens to you, that the tip of the eraser becomes so dirty that you're just applying graphite, this is a tip. You can clean it by erasing on a clean area of the paper, and the tip becomes much cleaner. So you're erasing the eraser, and now you can come here, and when you erase, it's much cleaner. And don't be afraid of using the eraser, and don't be afraid of not using the eraser. There we go. So once I have all the branches, I'm gonna draw these very long. They're a little bit thinner here than here. How thin? I'm gonna find out. Let's see. That's like 4 millimeters. That's almost 5. Because 4 and 3 millimeters. So let's see, how can I indicate that? this is going to be 4 millimeters, and here is 3 millimeters. And how long is this? Let's see, 3 centimeters. And the shapes on the surface of these cone-shaped structures are quite interesting. I think I'm going to put this one in front, overlapping that one, and this one here, overlapped a little bit at the top, and then flowing. Remember, like in nature, all the observations that you make, when you come to your desk, you can bring with you. So I'm going to try to add a little bit of detail, and at the same time I'm going to tell you something super interesting that I found, because I kept thinking, why 2 types of cones? What is going on? Well, it just so happens that the red alder has 2 different types of flowers. When I look at these structures that I'm drawing, I notice that if I made a zoom here, sorry, I'm going to move this here. It's very interesting how they're like tiny scales. This is the very tip. So they are arranged this way, and not only look like tiny scales, but they kind of overlap each other. But the thing that is very interesting as well is that there is kind of room underneath. It's like there is a space in between. So I would definitely like to add that in my observation. So I'm gonna put this like scales. Looks like scales with a space in between. And this is my zoom. So the red alder has 2 different types of flowers, and these flowers come in male and female clusters. We have this cluster here, and these are the male flowers, and these cluster here are the female. So the red alder has 2 different types of flowers. So these these ones here, all the male flowers, and they come in clusters. In our case, we found 4, so I'm going to put 4. And they're also called catkins, which I find very funny. Catkins. And then this also has female flowers, and they are here. These are the tiny ones that I saw here. So these are the female flowers. And the female flowers, they also come in clusters. These were buds that will come in spring. And you will ask, but then what is this? Well, guess what? These are last year's fruits. So last year, these were as small as this. And how did that happen? We're gonna do that in a tiny second. Oh, one thing I really like about these cones is how I can see spaces in between. And that's why every time I move the branch, I get more tiny seeds. They're contained in there. When I see it from this angle, this is what I see. And I also added close-up photos so you can see them as well, if it's now a little bit hard to see in the video. Let me add, when I look closer, this is something I might need to do, zoom here, because this is so interesting how these tiny cones are starting to open up since I brought them home. And how they're starting to drop all these seeds. So as I said, so these are last year's fruit. Last year's fruits. They look, it looks like eyes. If I made it, the pupil around here, so I'm gonna make sure I circle my zoom. I add less detail here, but at least I want to make sure that I add enough detail so my study is as clear as I can. I'm gonna leave that zoom empty when it's tiny. So when I do to link two zooms, I put the ruler at the edge of one circle and the ruler at the edge of the other circle, and I make a line. Same here, from edge to edge. And this one that we did before, we'll do it as well, from edge to edge, from edge to edge. So we can totally clearly see that what is in the big circle, it's how we see the tiny circle but big. And this is my zoom, and how I see this space much darker, because light is not hitting. And that's where all these tiny seeds are coming from, and making my desk very interesting. So how come that this is the last year's fruit? Well, in spring, I was reading go. So how come? How is that possible? That these are last year's fruits? Well, in the spring, the male flowers, the catkins, they start releasing a lot of pollen. Tiny, 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 tiny particles of pollen. Have you seen people sneezing in the spring? That's because of the pollen. This pollen goes into the female flowers. So it comes like this. I'm going to make the arrows a little bit thicker so we don't confuse them with the arrows that are labeling parts. So this pollen goes back to the female flowers, and then next year we have the fruit. So actually these ones last year were this, and this year what are these guys doing? Well, the last year's fruits are releasing these tiny, tiny, tiny seeds. And guess what these seeds are called? They release these tiny nutlets. These are the seeds. And because I've been collecting them in my bug box, there's so many of them, I've been able to observe them. Some of them are stuck into the bottom. I've been able to look at them through my magnifying lens, and I realized that they have very, very interesting structure. I'm going to use my non-photo blue pencil to show you what I am seeing. And I also included photos of these so you can see it. But they have a very interesting shape. So this is the part that is connected to the cone, before it jumps out. The part in the middle that has this shape is the actual seed. And you are not gonna believe what these things on the sides are. These are wings. So when the seed falls from the cone, they gently, thanks to the wind, fall into the ground. And some seeds have huge wings. You might have seen them falling from the trees doing spirals, but these are not that kind of seeds. And these actually are called narrow-winged, because the wings are very, very, very narrow. Let's take some measurements. I think, oops, come back. It's a 2 millimeter seed. And you know what? I'm gonna draw a seed the exact same size, and I'm gonna do a circle and add a zoom. Otherwise, when I look at this tomorrow, I'm gonna think that this is as big as it was, when in reality it was that tiny. This is zoom. And I'm gonna measure more things because I haven't measured how long these little cones are. It's 2 centimeters. The fruits from last year are 2 centimeters. The buds are 1 centimeter. Let's put this here. And let's measure the female flowers. Is 1 centimeter. I'm going to add a little bit more of detail here because I see these when I look up close, and the spaces in between this scale-like surface. Because I'm reaching the bottom, I see the scales wrapping up around it. And I also see that the top is a little bit darker. And I can do this with color, or I can do this with the graphite pencil. There we go. I think I would like to add a little bit of detail as well on this zoom, because I see that this part is a little bit different in color, so I want to remember that. Also, I noticed that sometimes these shapes are a little bit thinner on the edges, so they're not that regular. Regular means same shape, same location of the structure. So this is quite regular. Irregular means that the shapes are kind of different. Like they all have different personalities. They're not two that are the same. Remember that in nature things are much more diverse than we think in our brains, and that's why it's very important that we observe and all these irregularities. Otherwise it looks like it was made by a robot. All the same. But that's not what I'm observing. And there is something, oh my goodness, another one. I wonder if I move these a little bit, how many are they going to come out? Oh my goodness, do you see that? Oh, so many. So many. You know what I'm going to do? I think I'm going to go and get some glue. So I'm just going to get some glue, and I just had this idea right now. And I'm going to put some glue here on the paper, and I'm going to drop all the seeds there. Hope that they are not all clustered, so they're separate enough. And I have more here. There we go. So now, the only thing I need to be careful is not to touch anything there, so they stay there, they dry. That's fun. So I can actually say here, real nutlets. And I'm gonna have fun with my title. I think I am going to, I'm gonna be careful with that so I don't put all my hand there, but I'm gonna do a big title. And while I do this, I'm gonna tell you another super interesting thing about this type of tree. We said that the wood was used, right, for carvings and for smoking fish. Guess what? The bark is also very useful. The bark was used as medicine because it had some antibiotic properties. And guess what? I'm gonna be careful with that. But not only the bark has some antibiotic properties, the leaves as well. Leaves were used and are used today because they have some anti-tumor properties. And guess what? The twigs and the inner bark are also used because they produce this red dye. So my goodness, we use all sorts of things from this tree. I'm gonna write that down. Here we use the wood was used as fuel to smoke fish. And also for carvings. And the bark was used as medicine Also, the leaves were used as medicine. And the twigs and the bark, inner bark, were used as a dye. So I think I'm gonna get some colors and I'm gonna continue in a second. So I noticed before that the male flowers, the catkins, are much redder than the last year's fruits. So with the red, I think I'm gonna start just adding a very, very, very light red color also in my close-up. And when I am using this color, I also see there are other things that might also need some red, like the buds and maybe the female flowers here. Then I see there's some tiny, tiny, tiny hints of green when I look closer. One thing I noticed is that the male flowers, when they are immature, when they are not ready yet, they are green. I saw some. And when they are ready, they are brown reddish. Reddish brown. Oops, sorry, I didn't move that. So when they are not ready, they're green, and when they are ready, they're this reddish brown. So this one in the back, it's a little bit more immature, so I might add that there, whereas the other ones are a little bit more reddish brownish. And because this is behind that one, I'm gonna make sure that I add a little shadow there. In my close-up, I can be much more meticulous and much more attentive to all the detail. As I said, these scales were a little bit darker and brownish at the very top. And these spaces is where the pollen is going to come out of in the spring. You see a little bit of yellow. Color pencil is so much fun because you can use colors on top of colors. Let's see, I'm going to use the buds are a little bit darker on the edges, but overall they are this kind of reddish violet, and now I'm going to go with a brown and this tree, it's interesting to look at because what am I doing? I forgot about my seeds. Put them again. One tip so you don't go over the seeds is with a piece of paper, you put it there, and now you can color things and move your hand, and you're protecting the drawing or the seeds in this case. One thing I notice is that this branch, depending on where the sun hits, it will be darker if the light comes from here and lighter on the top. So if you draw it at home, it depends on where you put your light. And I'm not forgetting the tiny, tiny little white dots that I see. But I think I will add them after I am done with my main overall color brown. And it's brown, but it's also kind of, it has some red to it as well. So I'm gonna make sure that I do a pass with a red. So even though I won't see it, I will have a feeling that is there. Then a little bit more brown. And these branches here were a little bit greenish. Maybe no, it's green, so I'm going to add some yellow and a little bit of a darker tone. Definitely darker them a little bit with brown, especially if they are behind. And if you think, I hope the paper hasn't glued to the seeds, but now I can come here to my pine cones, come here. Now I can come here to my cones and make sure that I give them a little bit of an overall brown. And in my close-up, I'm gonna note differences in color. I found that the inside, especially on the bigger ones, is a little bit of a different color. Let's see. I think it's a little bit this color. And the change is very subtle. it's definitely there. Just refining the dark areas that you will see better in the photo. These cones that, as we said, happen to be last year's fruit. And I wonder if this is why this branch looks like it's about to break. So I'm going to just add that. It looks like it is going to break, and probably is very useful for the tree to lose that. And finally, I'm gonna color my title, and I'm gonna use my piece of paper here so I don't move the seeds as I am coloring. And because it's a red alder, I'm gonna go with a nice red. Can hold the paper that is under your hand to protect things that you glue to the paper, like the seeds, the nutlets. So, this is my project. Now is your time to have